the IDS building. So
how high up are you?
Only 13.
Okay, that's still nice. That's still nice. Well, you know, we're having fun, we're bantering, and we've got 20 folks here, and so I'm just going to go ahead and welcome all of you. This is the final webinar in the Move Minneapolis series. We did a special trio late this summer, and it ties into tomorrow's big day, which is car-free MSP. Today's topic is all about telework, and we have a really good sized audience and an amazing guest who has joined me right here, and I'll introduce her in a moment. We want two things today, besides to give you a lot of really great information. We really want you to join the conversation, so send us those questions, send us those comments. I'm not going to be like anybody on Minnesota Public Radio and say, that wasn't a question, that was a comment. Send us your comments. Be part of this conversation. We're not going to have a boring webinar. Please, again, use that Q&A. So I'm going to start by offering you some background on the local telework situation. Then we're going to invite you to take part in a live poll. I've put together some questions you may enjoy answering. We'll get a sense of, you know, what our small community today is thinking about telework and how it's working for them. And then we're going to have some fun with our special guest. So here's where we swap out. And I want to make an introduction here. I'll go quickly just with myself. I'm Mary Morse Marti. I'm the head of Move Minneapolis, the executive director. I've been in the transportation sphere since about 2002. When I started the local car sharing company, now known as Our Car. And now I'm with Move Minneapolis, where we do our best to figure out how we can get people out of their cars to protect air quality in the Twin Cities. There's all kinds of other reasons that we want to do that, from savings to equity to health, you know, for the protection of your lungs and the lungs of your family and neighbors. But mostly, we really are here for the environment, and this is a fantastic way to do it. And next to me, I don't know if she's on your right or on your left. My right or your? I don't know, but it's Holly. It's Holly Robbins. And Holly is an attorney. She's going to offer some expertise to help you manage your telework program using best practices. Holly is a shareholder in the Minneapolis office of Littler, and they're a global employment law firm. She's practiced employment law for more than 20 years and works with employers to devise successful strategies for policies and procedures, diversity and inclusion, anti-discrimination and anti-harassment efforts, disability accommodations, leaves of absences, workplace investigations, employee and management training, disciplinary actions, and other workplace issues. She represents employers in employment litigation, and she's on Littler's Women's Leadership Initiative Steering Committee. Welcome, Holly.
Thanks, Mary. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Fantastic. So here's something super exciting. Today is the day where the whole Move Minneapolis team is incredibly proud to present to you our very new, as of this morning, Move Minneapolis Guide to Remote Work. The entire team worked on this. We have a bunch of very smart people with great ideas, and they took separate pieces of this topic and wrote sections on how to do it. It covers everything from technology to managing the pets in your life as they attempt to destroy your career by joining you in all forms in your office. You can go right now, don't go right now, stick with us, but when you're ready, head over to our website, moveminneapolis.org, get your copy, and let us know how it works for you. We did create it so that we can update it. We may, find that it needs updating quickly, or maybe it's pretty good and we don't have to update it for a while, but let us know. Again, we're there for you, so it's very helpful. Car-free MSP is tomorrow. There is still time to sign up if you haven't yet. You can go to moveminneapolis.org and tell us that you're going to not drive for 24 hours. If you do that and you sign up, you are automatically entered into our drawing. You could win a Pedigo City Commuter electric bike, an e-bike. They're all the rage. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that people are enraged about them as well. We think they're great at Move Minneapolis. We think that they're a key part of the future of sustainable transportation. So join us for Car Free MSP. It's not too late for you as an individual. It's potentially not too late for you and your own company to join tomorrow. It's going to be a blast. So let's get down to telework. I wanted to talk about the fact that telework is working really, really well. And at the very least, we can say it's working very, very broadly, because people are teleworking all over the place. And they tell researchers that they like it. So this slide is sharing with you that 75% of the people who responded who are teleworking want to keep doing so. And it's not like they just want to do it once a week. You know, the 1 to 2 day a week section of this pie chart is only 20%. If you start looking at 3 to 4 and every day, you see the majority of teleworkers want to continue teleworking. So what does that mean? I mean, it means a ton of things. Not least among them, we're going to have cleaner air, because people are not going to be getting in their cars every single day and driving whatever that is, 3 miles, 5 miles, 50 miles, our typical commutes. You know, people put a lot of miles on those cars, and they're saving money now. You know, they're getting healthier. All kinds of things are happening. We'll talk about that later. So how does this affect us? A very, very large parking ramp complex in Minneapolis surveyed the people who have parking contracts there. Oh, I'm sorry, this is a different poll entirely. This is the one of business leaders downtown. 85.5% of them have made or will be making telework an option. So company leaders, not just teleworkers, but leaders themselves, also really think telework has a future in their companies. And this is all very true, but there's lots of things that are not maybe as easy as we wish about teleworking. We have to figure a bunch of more things out. We all know the problem of having no school now for parents of school-age children. I really, frankly, have no idea how they're doing it. Employers have invested in real estate. They have 10-year leases. Some of them have longer leases. These are significant outlays of cash. What's going to happen to them when none of their employees want to come back? You know, and Holly, what's going to happen when employees say, no way, I am not coming back?
Well, I think employers are going to have to do a couple things. One is think about what their telework policies are and what jobs can be telework jobs. They're going to have to think about keeping their employees happy, and they're going to have to think also about the culture of their company and what they want to, how they want to position work, whether that's work from home or work in the office. So they have a lot of decisions to make there. And obviously there are financial issues in here too, because real estate leases in downtown Minneapolis, for example, are expensive, and they can cut some costs if they can figure out how to keep up productivity while people are working at home.
Mm-hmm. With your knowledge about breaking a lease,
I don't have a lot of knowledge about breaking leases. I'm not a real estate lawyer.
Okay, so you'll have to humor me. I am in charge of a large ad agency, and I'm renting space in a downtown tower, and I have 4 years left on my lease. Mm-hmm. And I just realized that none of my team really needs to meet together every single day in an office. I mean, I hate putting you on the spot because this
Yeah.
isn't your legal area of expertise,
Yeah.
but do I call a lawyer? Do I go to my my building owner and negotiate? What's the, like, what should I do?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, a lot of companies are renegotiating, and so one thing would be to make contact with the leasing company and work with them on renegotiating a lease. You may need to have a lawyer to do that. So it's a good idea to think about that. Think about what you want, how much real estate you might actually need for meetings and that sort of thing. Or for use that you may have some small group of people that you want to maintain on property. If you want reception so you can have meetings, if you want people on property to print documents and maintain certain office activities, you can think about what you need, and then talking to the building about going forward and how you're going to operate.
So negotiating and being
Yeah.
open.
And those leases, a lot of leases are being renegotiated right now. So if you're thinking about it, you're not the only one. I mean, another thing is parking. Companies have parking contracts, and they're renegotiating those as well.
Yeah. That's very, very true. A question I have about the next bullet point. There are some companies now, we've been following this very carefully. At first it was, we'll look at what's happening in June. We're gonna leave our offices in March, and then we'll see what's happening with the pandemic in June. And then it was, we're gonna see what happens at Labor Day.
Yep.
Labor Day came and went, and schools are closed, and it looks like the pandemic might be revving up again. So now people are looking at January 1st.
Right.
And
what's the magic of January 1st?
What's the magic of January 1st as opposed to next summer? And people have different reasons, and we can get into those later. But if your company calls you back, here's the lawyer question. If your company calls you back and you see all around you that people are still getting sick, what is your best strategy as a teleworker? And what are companies, like, what should they be doing?
Yeah. Well, I think as a teleworker, if your company says, I want you back in the office, part of that is to look at it and say, and to maybe talk to your HR representative or talk to your boss about why you need to come back, and whether you could work from home or continue to work from home, whether your job is one that supports that on a long-term basis, and how you can work that out. There are some companies that are simply saying, no, we really want people back in the office. We're finding we need people there, and you may hit roadblocks there. And for companies that are looking at this, they need to consider whether their employees are happy. They need to consider their employees' safety, because if you have, for example, a large number of people who are maybe commuting on public transportation, that subjects them to potential exposure to COVID or the flu or other conditions. And if your employees get sick, then they are not going to be productive for you. So on a very basic level there, for companies, looking at where their employees are productive and keeping them as productive as possible is important. So that's something for companies to consider, as well as all of the other things we're going to talk about with respect to the cost savings associated with teleworking, and how companies can keep employees productive and on track and connected while they're teleworking.
Excellent, excellent. The last thing I have on this screen is that there are some employees who are ready to work very, very remotely. I won't say who, but I know that I have a coworker who is constantly checking out incredibly interesting places that they might move to for a period of time. And I have literally zero reason that I wouldn't let this person go to Bali. You know, I have no reason to stop them.
Well, you might have legal reasons to stop them, because if you have employees who are working in Bali, then they might be subject to employment law in Bali, and you need to know what that is. So you might want to figure out before you say, sure, you can go and work full-time in Bali forever, what laws you're going to need to follow for that employee. And that includes not just employment laws, but also tax laws. Do you need to set up a company in Bali in order to have an employee there? You know, do you need to, how do you get an employee ID number for your employee who's in Bali? I just worked through this for an employee who was going to work in Canada, and there are hoops to jump through just to have your employees working in Canada on a long-term basis. So it's not, you know, it's not perhaps as simple as that to say my employees can work, you know, from the space shuttle or from wherever they want to. However, you know, when you're talking about within the United States, you often have employees, you know, you may have employees working wherever they want to. I will tell you that today I'm working in St. Louis, Missouri. So Mary and I live across the street from each other, but I'm visiting my parents right now. And so I am working remotely, and I have been on and off during this pandemic. So, but and my employer happens to have an office here and is set up for whatever they need to. But if your employees are working in other states, they may be subject to state law in those other states. And I'm going to give you one particular example. If your employees are going to work in California, California thinks that they are subject to California law. And that even may apply to very short periods of time, like a couple of weeks at a time. So you have to look at sick and safe leave laws in California, or there's something called a wage theft notice that we have in Minneapolis. We have to provide that to employees in Minneapolis, but they have something a little bit different in California. There are things you have to have on your paycheck if you're a California employee that you don't have to have if you're a Minnesota employee. So although we can work very remotely, you still have to think about those things, and your employees also have to think about whether they perhaps have to be paying taxes in the state where they are working.
Okay.
And that's something you don't necessarily have to figure out, but you should tell your employees that they should talk to their tax advisors.
Okay. I think we got that more or less right in our new Telework guide. Those are some really important nuts and bolts. I work for a really small organization, and many of our guests probably do too, and we don't have permanent attorneys, you know,
right.
who is of counsel? Well, it's the person that you call when you've got a problem. How would I even take the first step to figure out who to call if I have my Bali employee asking these questions?
Well, there are a lot of resources on the internet that you can start with. But if you're an employer who's looking for help, my firm certainly does this. This is what, you know, we do, is we advise employers. And there are many other firms that do it as well. But there's a lot of information that you can get that just to get you started out. But I think the main thing to think about is, you know, you need to know, oh, if I have an employee in Bali, I may have to know what law applies to that person. How do I set up their taxes? What do I do? And I don't do the tax part. That you'd have to talk to an accountant or a tax lawyer for. So what do I need to do next? But this is the kind of question that my firm and I are answering all the time, is what do I need to do? Now I have a California employee. What do I need to do for that person? Now I have an employee in Canada. What do I need to do for that person? And there are things you need to be aware of.
Okay, that's great advice. I wonder how many employees we'll have who want to live in Canada, maybe in November. We'll figure that out.
Yep.
All right. Well, as promised, I want to keep everyone awake and alive. So let's do some polling. This is where you can answer questions that will appear on your screen, and they're all related to you, not necessarily your employer. So first question up there, the moment the pandemic is over, seriously, it's over. Your children are back in school. The coffee house down the block is opened again. We're back to normal. Everything's fine. Tell us how often you're going to go back to work. If anybody's having difficulty getting to the poll, you can ask questions, of course, in the chat. Check it out. Right, let's start with the most interesting outcome. I plan to work in the office 100%, 15% of you. So telework is working well. 4 days a week at 31%, 2 days a week at 38%. Telework is winning. Let's go to our next question. Okay, what does it take for you to move back to the office? For the 15% of you that will. No, everybody will go back at some point, if only for a meeting. I want to thank Becky Alper, who is our producer today, who's managing all these polling items. Okay, so you want it all. You want all of the above. A vaccine is even more important than successful treatment. That makes total sense. And 14% are ready to move back to the office. I'm wondering if they're the same 14% who will stay in the office. What do you think, Holly?
I think probably so. I think there are those people who want to go back to the office. They miss the interaction. They want to be with their coworkers, or perhaps teleworking just doesn't work for them. They don't like doing it at home, and they want to conflate their workplace and their office, and they're ready to get back to work, or to the office, I should say.
I dressed up today for the first time since March. I am wearing a dress.
You look very nice.
On makeup. Thank you very much. I worked hard. So our third poll question is up. What do you find problematic about working at home?
I'm doing the poll along with you.
Oh, I love this. You're disconnected from your coworkers. I think that's a very nice thing to say.
This is interesting to me, Mary, because there's 0% for children at home. And I mean, I know from my work that is a huge issue for a lot of people. So it may be just the demographics of our group here. But I mean, I certainly am hearing a lot about that issue of people working while their children are trying to get their attention. I have a client who has 4 children under the age of 10, and she told me once, I can't tell you how many phone calls I've taken from inside a locked bathroom. So, so I know that's an issue. Yeah.
Can we bring up gender roles here?
Sure.
Have you heard anything? Are women bearing the brunt of this? Women who are parents of children?
I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, certainly both men and women are experiencing issues with having childcare. issues while they're trying to work from home. They have kids who are going to school. I think particularly people either who have special needs children or who have children who are maybe under the age of about 10 or 12, because those kids need a lot of attention and they can't self-direct as much as perhaps the high school kids can. And although, I don't have any high school kids, so parents of high schoolers might tell me that no, they absolutely need a ton of attention. But in any event, even though there are a lot more men taking more, I think, more interest in and more paying more attention to their children's upbringing than perhaps in past years, I think still there is an inordinate amount of weight placed on women. And I'm seeing and hearing a lot about women who are finding that they need to take time off from their jobs because they can't both do the job and take care of their kids at work, and that this is happening more with women than with men. Or they're having to flex their work in ways that are very disruptive to themselves and perhaps to their employer, where maybe they're working in shifts with their partner, and so they're maybe not available all the time during the day. It's also very taxing, I think, on a person to have to do that. There's really no personal time left, even for that hour between maybe when the kids go to bed and when the parent goes to bed. The parent is then using that time as work time. So it is something that I think employers need to pay very close attention to, how this is affecting their the women in their workforce and what they can do to support those women during this time and going forward, to make sure that they're not seeing a pay lag or people not getting promoted in the same way that they have been in the past. So yeah, I think that it's a really important issue, and it's going to be very prominent in the next year or so as we see what the outcome is of the COVID pandemic.
I am hoping that along with that, we will have discovered the true value of our students' schools and their teachers and their child care providers.
Yep.
And maybe we'll start seeing some new professional respect for those fields,
Yep.
which we have not until now perhaps noticed.
Right.
I've got a question that came through that I think is somewhat related to this. Alex wants to know, do you think telework adoption will cause employers to rethink the 40 hours per week expectation?
I don't know, but I kind of hope so, because I think one of the things that some employers are seeing is that their employees are pretty productive when they're at home, and they're not stopping to have conversations in the same way. They're not using time to commute and then to kind of take your coat off and get yourself set up, and all of that goes away. And I think that employers may find that certain jobs can be done in less time. I think creative employers need to be looking at what their work week looks like and how they can get the most productivity out of their employees, so that pay doesn't go, there's not an idea that, well, now I'm going to have my employees work 30 hours a week, but their pay is going to go down proportionately, because I don't think the idea isn't that the employer is getting less out of the employee, but just that the employee can maybe be a little more productive and do more with a shorter period of time. So, but that's going to, like I said, be up to some creativity on the part of employers. Yeah.
In my own personal life, I have discovered the ways of the tech worker. My son is a software developer, and they have really driven a lot of new workplace norms that the rest of us are starting to benefit from. Just because I think they held a specific skill that was in demand for a while. I think now there's a lot more software developers, but as things change, we're starting to see some reevaluation of what's normal with a capital N.
Right.
What is normal?
Right. I mean, the other thing that I think could happen too, and this is a little bit of the flip side and the negative, is that, employers may see, what, I'm getting this much productivity out of my employees, I don't need as many. I'm finding that certain employees are getting as much done in half the time, and so that means I need half the employees in that particular job. So that can be the result too, but maybe that results in some shifting around of jobs and where people are doing them and how.
So could that be also the beginning of the post-industrial economy where, we've been waiting for robots to take over agriculture and nurses' aides position, and we're all, what are we going to do about that? Maybe this is the beginning of humanity being able to work in jobs that are really good for us.
Yeah. Well, robots don't get COVID, so that's to the extent that you can have, you can animate sort of certain jobs and to allow people not to be in certain places,
right,
and therefore getting sick. That has pluses and minuses, because obviously people also need jobs. But I think there are also new jobs that are going to grow out of this.
Oh, yeah. And let's talk about equity. I mean, if you don't have access to a car and you live anywhere outside of the transit belt in any city, you're a little bit SOL when it comes to getting to a good job. And until now, I think we've said, well, you better get a car. That's like the American dream. First you get a car and then you get success. We need to flip that on its head and say you have success because you don't have a car. And
it's something cities are going to have to be concerned about, though, the urban centers, because now people can really do jobs from anywhere. And I think we're going to see a little bit of a downturn in that urban real estate market for office space. And, may see people, I think Manhattan is already seeing people saying, you know what, we're moving to the suburbs. We don't want to be stuck in a high rise during a pandemic. And so it's something for cities to be thoughtful about. Very.
I often wonder how many high rises will be turned into homes.
Yeah.
If the idea of the downtown business model is over, and now, people, we love to be together. That is our way. We are social animals. So maybe we want to live in these cities of Oz that we've created, rather than live out on a farm, in somewhere that used to be a field or a tree area. Maybe we all want to live downtown and telework and
be together
and do what people do. I mean, if we didn't have to commute every day into downtown, imagine what our roads would look like, and then imagine what downtown streets would look and feel like. I mean, they're going to start looking more like Europe. We're going to have people strolling along the boulevard. Every evening, there's going to be this marvelous convergence of people who are peacocking for one another, because that's what we like to do. Rolling down the streets on their bicycles and walking. Instead of what we have now, which is kind of okay, look, it's 6:30 a.m. Boom! Everybody converges on downtown in their cars, and then, transit, which I love. Transit is the best thing ever. And but then also, it's sort of inhumane. We've created an environment that does not work well for the people who live there. This is all fun to think about. So. I'm going to advance the slide to a little bit more. I mean, some of this maybe we've moved beyond, because I think we know what telework is, but Holly, tell us more about these things.
Well, I thought there's sort of a who, what, when, where of telework, that when employers are thinking about this, they have to think about who can telework. And employers have gotten a lot more creative about that. I can say in my office, in the past, the idea was, well, lawyers can telework to a certain extent because we can take our laptops and be wherever we need to be, and we can go visit clients, and we can come in and go as we please. But the support staff, well, we need them to be in the office. There's no way to have support staff that are outside the office. Well, obviously, in March, we found out immediately that that was not true. And we outfitted our support staff with laptop computers, and they've been doing their work and supporting us just fine. Certain jobs.
Can I hop in there? I did notice in our poll that the second thing people said was a problem after missing their coworkers was that their desks and chairs and that kind of equipment was not okay. How did you manage that?
Yeah, and that is an issue, and it's an issue that employers need to think about and to work with their employees with as they're going forward. I mean, right now, in the kind of immediate COVID aftermath, it was sort of a figure it out kind of a deal. But if you're thinking about a long-term telecommuting policy and agreements with employees, it is a good idea to work through those issues of who gets to telework. Well, they have to be able to have some space that makes sense for them to telework in, a space that is going to be ergonomically appropriate, a space that's not going to be subject to a lot of interruptions. So a space maybe where they can close a door if they have other people or pets or what have you living with them, or a space that is going to actually support putting a computer on it and doing the work, because that's how people are working. So, it definitely, the space issue is an issue, and it may be an issue for why certain people don't want to keep teleworking, because their space really isn't that good for it. And so, this is a little bit of an equity issue. You have to have the space for it in order to do it well, and to be efficient and to get your work done. So, who gets to telework, part of it going forward might be a little bit, does this person have space to support teleworking? And right now we're not teleworking from coffee shops. In regular times, people do that, but that also depends on what their job is. If they have to take private phone calls, then working from a coffee shop is not a viable solution for that. When are our employees teleworking? Employers should figure out a schedule for the employees and commit to that, have employees commit to it. There's a difference between exempt and non-exempt workers. So sometimes those are considered like your salaried and non-salaried, or your salaried and hourly workers. And for hourly workers, it is really important that they record their time accurately. So that when is important, because that's how they get paid. And if they don't record their time accurately, they're not going to get paid properly, and employers can get in trouble for that. So that's something that employees and employers need to work together to make sure it's done properly. And then for the salaried employees, part of that is like being able to get a hold of people at the time, make sure that everyone is available when they're supposed to be available. And we talked already a little bit about the where our employees working, but that's not just, that could be what state they're working in or what country, but also, as we've already discussed, a little bit of where in their house are they working, or where in their apartment are they working, and is it set up properly? So it's just a little overview of some of the things to think about at the outset when you're thinking, are we going to keep teleworking?
Yeah, it seems like now is a good time where people could completely revisit their systems, which is a nice segue into this world.
So there's a lot here.
There is a lot here.
And if there are questions, we can also, interrupt this with this. But, having policies and agreements, I think, is a good idea. And you're right, now is the time to start thinking about this if you haven't already, because if a lot of employers, I think, started in with COVID and immediately went to teleworking without any kind of policies or agreements that really applied, because it's a whole different situation. But going forward, getting policies and agreements in place is a great idea. And those will cover a lot of the issues that we see here, so that employees know what their expectations are, and employers and managers know what the expectations are, and both sides can work toward those expectations. I saw there was a little question about homeowners associations evicting people. I have to say that's not one that I've seen. And I'd be interested to know about what kinds of things are prompting that. Because one of the things I would say with work from home is, if you're working from home, then that one thing employers really don't want is people then going to the worker's home to do anything work related. So you don't want to be saying, okay, now our workers are going to have clients coming to their homes. It opens up all kinds of liability issues, and that might be a homeowners association kind of thing. So I don't know what the other issues are that are prompting that, but wanted to acknowledge the question.
Yeah.
Wage hour issues are really important. And this is making sure people are getting paid properly for the work that they do and the hours that they work. And just as employers have policies that employees have to record their time accurately when they come to work in an office, those same things apply in a telework environment, because employees still have to say, yes, I started work at 8 and I took my break at this time, and I took my half hour for lunch at this time, and I ended my work day at this time, and so that they can show what they did, so that they get paid properly. And the employers want that to happen so they don't get sued over wage hour violations. Mm-hmm. So those things are quite important. Mm-hmm. Equipment and expenses is a big issue, and supplies. When you're setting up a telework environment, and the employee has to have certain things to support that, like a decent internet connection and a phone service that's going to support whatever they need to do.
And who pays for that?
Well, usually the employee does, because they already have it set up. In California, I'm going back to the California issue, the employer is going to have to pay for something, but in most states that's not the case. That the employer can say, if you're going to telecommute, you need to have certain equipment set up, you need to have certain setups on your own. Now, that said, that this is another employee satisfaction issue, and mm-hmm. also is an issue of the counterbalance of expenses that the employer might not have to pay because they don't have employees in the office. So yeah. I see a lot of different policies here where some employers might offer some kind of a stipend to support internet and other connections. They might offer some kind of a stipend to say, we're going to give you $300 to help set up your office. You mm-hmm. can buy a chair or an undermount computer, keyboard set yeah. up, or different things that they might want to get their office set up properly.
I'm going to jump in here because I've yeah. seen something that strikes me in the world of helping people do transportation and commuting mm-hmm. benefits. We tend to see that those who have get most, and those who mm-hmm. do not get yeah. least, where a company that employs a lot of white collar workers is right. going to be the company that says, oh, here's your free transit pass, here's your hugely subsidized or free parking contract.
Yeah.
Where if you are a cleaner in a hotel and you're making, the princely sum of $12 an hour,
right,
you get nothing. So yeah. Can we maybe work? I think we certainly need to work toward a more equitable model of employers who, if you're not going to pay your employees very much, if they're relying on public assistance to even right. live, and they're working full time for you, shouldn't you just give them a Wi-Fi connection?
Right. I mean, and that's something I am seeing employers doing, is to say if an employee doesn't have it, they need it to do the work. And I think this is something that has happened over the last 6 months. Then okay, well, we'll set you up with that connection, and and get you started. And from the employer perspective, they are probably saving money by having the employee work in their own home.
Yeah.
So these are going to be employee specific, or employer specific. But it's certainly something, if an employee is concerned about it, to talk to your employer about, and to make sure, and to have those open communications. Expense reimbursement is another issue, or just things like supplies. How do employees get supplies? Like, do they need pens and pads of paper? Do they need office paper to print? These are things employers need to think about, what they're going to supply and how they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Another issue, an interesting one, is just like the idea of private information or confidential information. And if employees then have paper documents at home, what do they do with those? If they have confidential information on them, and how do they get them shredded properly? And so my employer, for example, has a policy on what you do with your paper documents, and submitting a reimbursement for it to get them shredded. So that's an issue.
So they don't have a mobile shredding van that goes?
They don't. We don't have a mobile shredding. Yeah. Then disability accommodations, that continues to be an issue. Oftentimes telecommuting is an accommodation for a disability. Employers have an obligation to provide reasonable accommodations to employees who have disabilities, and sometimes teleworking is one of those. And that employers still need to consider that this may be an accommodation. Now, in the past, a lot of employers have said, no, we need our workers to work in the office for workplace culture issues, or because we have lots of meetings, or what have you. And that usually was a sufficient answer to say, okay, that makes that unreasonable as an accommodation. The whole COVID situation has flipped the script on that. Mm-hmm. So now it's going to be hard for employers to say that telework is not a reasonable accommodation for most office jobs. Now, still, being a janitor, you can't do that remotely. But a lot of office jobs, you're going to have that as a disability accommodation. Now, the other thing to think about, though, is that if a person has a disability and perhaps needs something in their home office, the employer should discuss that with the employee. So, for example, an employee has a back issue and they need a stand-up desk. And maybe they had one in the office, but they don't have one at home. Now, that's a situation where I think the employer would do well to work with the employee to pay for a stand-up desk. It's not something that costs all that much money. And I think most courts would say that's reasonable for the employer to provide a stand-up desk to the employee. That's just one example. There may be others as well, but it's still something to consider.
Good point. Very good point. I do want to, this is a little off topic, but it came up in the chat. We want to address it. Michelle asks, are there serious conversations about transitioning office space and buildings to residences, multi-use taking place? And if so, who's having them? I know that there have been a couple of Minneapolis Downtown Council presentations about that, Michelle, and you will be glad to know that Move Minneapolis is planning a real estate webinar later this fall, where we're going to bring in a developer who has talked about doing this, about transforming offices into residential, as well as I don't even know what they call their firm, but they help people with lease negotiations and connect them with remodelers and designers and whatnot. So we'll get around to that. Stay tuned. So Holly,
Yeah.
Of the next, I'm looking at this, we have 9 minutes left and I want to get through your next slide too.
Yeah.
Of the next few items, I mean, one thing I have questions about myself is your number 6, the productivity and performance. What do you do when somebody just stops showing up?
Yeah. Well, what do you do when they just stop showing up in your office space? I think a lot of employers look at this as, well, okay, but it's different if they're working from home, but it's not. One of the things that employers need to keep doing is reviewing their employees, providing feedback, communicating effectively with employees. If an employee stops showing up and they stopped showing up in the workplace, or they stopped doing their work when they were at the office, then presumably they'd start through a disciplinary process or a performance improvement process. The same thing should happen if they stop showing up or stop doing their work. You stop seeing the productivity. You can't get a hold of them when you call them, or they don't respond to emails. Then they're going to go through a disciplinary process just like they would in the office. Mm-hmm. And that should be communicated to them. Employees need to understand that just because they're working from home doesn't mean that they can ignore emails from their boss, or that their productivity expectations are lower. Mm-hmm. So part of that is really good communication. Part of that is hard for Minnesotans, which is that you need to deal directly with people. But that's a conversation that I have with employers in the office and in the workspace as well as at home. If there's a problem, you need to address it.
I just can't do that.
Well, maybe it's easier now because you can do it not having to look at them face to face.
Yes. Yeah, there's that. So does anything change? I mean, we have our processes and whatnot, but I mean, do things move faster? Do they move more slowly?
No, I think they should move pretty much the way that they would otherwise. Now, you may, with certain people, see a more marked drop-off in productivity. I mean, let's face it, there are going to be those people who, when they feel like I'm not being watched, feel like they can do whatever they want to. Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, people are doing their jobs. I mean, people right now are worried about their jobs. Mm-hmm. And because of the economy, because so many jobs have been lost. And so I think a lot of people are really trying to be as on top of things as they possibly can in the workplace.
Very good point.
Yeah.
So number 9, caregiver issues. I've got to come back to it, even though it didn't show up in our polls so high. I am very, very worried about people who are taking care of a loved one with a disability. I mean, we have many sandwich generation workers out there who are caring for their parents with dementia or Parkinson's disease, and they are at home working.
Yeah.
What?
And traditionally, with the caregiver issues, one of the things you would put in a telework agreement is that telework is not a substitute for school or caregivers or what have you. Now, during COVID times, that has been relaxed a lot because the reality is people's children are at home while they are working, and there's nobody else who can look after them. And people's parents are at home while they're working, and there's no one else who can look after them, or their disabled spouses or what have you. Mm-hmm. So during this time, that expectation has, I think, lapsed a lot. But I also see employers are sort of getting, a little COVID fatigue on this and starting to expect, well, we shouldn't have to have this issue anymore. Why are we still talking about it? But the fact of the matter is, a lot of schools are not back to school right now. So it is something that employers need to continue to be patient with. And, when we get back to a time when children are in school and that sort of thing, typically it is, you don't want your employees to be both doing childcare and working at the same time, because they wouldn't be if they were in the office, and it is an impediment to getting work done. But right now, there's got to be some patience and some expectation that that has to happen if you want your employees to continue to work at all.
Yeah. Have you had any work experience yet with the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act?
Absolutely. I've spent a lot of time over the last few months writing policies, advising employers on it. And right now, that provides some relief for certain employers and employees under 500 employees. And if an employee needs time off to care for children in the home, then they can get that time off when their children's school is not available to them. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of gaps, but it also allows that, if an employee can continue to telework during that time, then they don't need to take that time off, and that works too. And that's where employers need to balance, well, do I want to let this employee telework? Am I doing better if they can telework and get paid their full pay, because the pay is not full pay under the FFCRA. Mm-hmm. And so, it provides some balance and some relief for employees.
Okay, thank you. This is our last slide before we hit the magic hour. What have we missed that's really important that we should talk about?
I think we've talked about a lot of these things, but I'm gonna go back a little bit to what we talked about with, just as you would discipline people a certain way if you're in the office or have the same kinds of expectations, you should also, just like I would advise any employer in any time, you want to treat similarly situated people similarly. And so, if there are certain jobs that people can do at home, then that should be available to people generally. Now, it may be that, there's a person whose productivity is terrible. Well, that person is not similarly situated to the person whose productivity is great. So you may be making different decisions about those people. But the employer always wants to be looking at fairness and trying to treat people the same in similar situations, and that both employees and managers have to be held accountable. So employees have to be held accountable to do the work that they're expected to do, but managers also have to be held accountable for that next issue of communication and maintaining communication during a difficult time. I have seen issues with employers sort of falling off the radar, and that's their job. And so as employees, they have to be held accountable for making sure that the employees who are working for them are communicated with properly.
That was fantastic. Holly Robbins with Littler, available to take our audience calls, I assume?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What is your phone number? I should have put that up on the screen.
612-313-7631.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Holly. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Thanks to Becky Alper, again, for supporting us as producer. My whole team at Move Minneapolis is looking forward to working with you as the pandemic continues on making telework the best it can be. Don't forget to go to our website, moveminneapolis.org, and download the fresh, off the presses Minneapolis Guide to Telework. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Holly. Bye-bye.